Israel is at a crossroads. A new death penalty bill, a tunnel crisis in Rafah, and a shocking media shutdown. 3 stories, 1 message. The nation is changing fast. Let's unpack what's really happening. Also, what does President Trump want from President Herzog? The death penalty bill passed its first reading in the Knesset with 39 votes in favor and 16 against. I remind you, this is out of 120. It still needs further readings. It has a stage in which it is taken into the committee for discussions and changes, and then the second and third votes, which can happen on the same evening, to become law. What is the meaning of this bill? This bill would amend the penal law so any person who intentionally or through recklessness causes the death of an Israeli citizen with a motive of racism or hatred, or causes harm to the state of Israel and to the revival of the Jewish people in its land, would face the death penalty. The death penalty would be mandatory in such cases, meaning courts would have to impose it when the criteria are met. The bill also includes changes for the military courts in what's known as the West Bank, in other words, the Judea and Samaria, and they could impose the death sentence by a simple majority rather than requiring a unanimous vote of the tribunal. And the regional military commanders would no longer have the power to commute such sentences, which is good because most of the current military commanders are progressive left. I could go into that, but I won't today. Motivations behind the bill are as follows. Obviously, a major trigger is the October 7th war, the attacks by Hamas and the consequences of that, which killed over 1,200 people, and the large number of hostages that were taken into the Gaza Strip. Proponents say tougher punishment is needed as a deterrent. The backers of this bill argue that past prisoner releases, the deals like Gilad Shalit and so on, where Israel released hundreds or thousands of Palestinian prisoners in exchange for Israeli hostages, undermine deterrence, and imposing the death penalty would, in their view, remove the possibility of such deals and signal that killing Israelis will carry the highest possible cost. We will see how that develops. After more than 11 years, the body of Lieutenant Hadar Goldin was identified and has returned home. Hadar was born in Eshhar in Misgav, a twin brother to Tzur, and a graduate of Bnei Akiva, and a person full of sensitivity, curiosity, and excellence, and love for his people. He was a painter, a writer, a musician, and a man of kindness who always sought to connect people, religious, secular, and so on. Commanders and soldiers in the IDF said that he was assigned to the Givati reconnaissance unit and finished the command course with distinction and served as a respected commander who believed in discipline alongside humanity. He refused to allow cursing in the unit and cared for the weak, always believing that leadership begins with personal example. On August 1st, 2014, at the height of Operation Protective Edge, Hamas terrorists attacked his unit immediately following the start of a ceasefire. And in the fierce battle, Major Bnaya Sarel, Staff Sergeant Liel Gidoni, and Hadar were killed. Hadar was abducted into a tunnel and was declared a fallen soldier whose burial place was unknown. His parents, Simcha and Leah, have since led a persistent struggle for his return. In the name of the son who saw his military service as a moral mission, one of the sentences he used to say remains his legacy. You have 2 options. Either deal with yourself or do something better. Now, after many long years of waiting, his body has been returned and buried in Israel. Now, I want to ask you at this point to like, share, click on the bell, subscribe, and comment so that I know what you're thinking and we can have a dialogue. Let's move on. There's good news from Rafah. The IDF has eliminated several terrorists entrenched in the tunnels during their attempt to harm our forces, and I remind you, it's during a ceasefire. The exact number of those eliminated is unknown, but the estimates are 3 or 4. It's estimated that there are still about 100 or so, 150 terrorists trapped in the tunnels, and that is significantly lower than the 200 that they originally thought. But here is the situation. In the Rafah tunnel, there are about 100 to 200 fighters from Hamas who are holed up in the tunnel network under the Israeli-controlled territory, so to speak, beyond the yellow line in the Israeli-controlled side. And it is complicating the ceasefire and Trump's 20-point plan. So let's see what each of the players want. What does Turkey want? Turkey wants to secure safe passage for the terrorists trapped in the tunnels, treating them as civilians, and to play a mediation role in resolving the standoff. What does Egypt want? Egypt wants the fighters to hand over their weapons and disclose tunnel locations in exchange for safe passage as part of a proposal to defuse this tunnel problem and maintain the ceasefire. What does Israel want? Israel wants to control the situation by insisting that the terrorists behind its lines either be captured or eliminated. And it resists granting them full safe passage into Hamas-controlled territory without accountability. What does the United States want? The U.S. wants these tunnel-stuck terrorists to be used as a model case for disarming and relocation under their broader peace ceasefire plan, and urges Israel to allow safe passage in order to preserve the truce. What does Hamas want? Hamas wants its fighters to be allowed to retreat to its controlled territory without being harmed and refuses to surrender its weapons. So what is the current challenge in dealing with the situation? Well, the current challenge is that none of the parties agree on who will take them, under what conditions, whether the weapons are handed over and there's accountability, relocation, and no country is willing to take them. Not Egypt, not Turkey, and not any other country. And of course, the risk of releasing them undermines deterrence and the ceasefire's credibility. Let's move on. Minister of Defense Israel Katz just decided to close the military radio station Galei Tzahal. The station's broadcasts will cease on March 1st, 2026. Minister of Defense Israel Katz will soon submit this resolution proposal for government approval to close the military station in accordance with the accepted procedure. The Minister of Defense intends to instruct that the station's broadcast cease March 1st, 2026, and to establish a professional team within the Ministry of Defense to lead the implementation of this decision. The implementation team will deal with all aspects related to the cessation of Galei Tzahal, also known here as Galatz, its activities. The primary assisting of civilian employees of the IDF who work at the station to terminate their employment with the appropriate managements while protecting their rights. In addition, and in accordance with the recommendation of the committee appointed to examine the activity of Galei Tzahal, the implementation team will work to preserve the activity of the Galgalat station, that's the music station as opposed to the political talk show station, while maintaining its character and nature, including in strengthening and raising awareness of road safety in line with its original purpose. Minister Katz stated, "As I made clear, what was in the past will not remain in the future." Galei was established by the government of Israel as a military station to serve as a voice and ears for IDF soldiers and their families, and not as a platform for expressing political opinions, many of which attack the IDF and IDF soldiers themselves. Operating a civilian radio station by the military is an anomaly that has no parallel in any democratic country in the world. The continued operation of the station involuntarily embroils the IDF in the political discourse and severely harms its status as the army of the people and its state-oriented nature. Over the past decades, from 1950s and until today, various options for closing the station or removing it from the defense establishment, privatizing it, or closing the current affairs department have been examined by many ministers of defense and chiefs of staff. But no process has matured into execution. Over the past 2 years, throughout the war, many soldiers and civilians, including members of bereaved families, have complained many times that they feel the station does not represent them and even harms the war effort and morale. Worse, our enemies interpret those messages as messages conveyed by the IDF. I intend to soon bring the decision to close the station to the government. This is the necessary step to preserve the state-oriented character of the IDF and strengthen public trust in it. The left progressive elements of the political spectrum have complained that this is an attack on democracy and the free press, something they didn't do when the right-wing media was threatened, such as Sheldon Adelson's Israel Today or the constant attacks on Channel 14. Now, there's a short update regarding the labor union corruption charges. The case is being handled by Lahav 433, the National Fraud Unit. The investigation has been running secretly for about 2 years and just became publicly with a wave of arrests and raids a few days ago. The judge in the case, Dorit Saban, has said that she extended the detention of the head of the labor union, Arnon Bar David, and stated that the picture emergent from the investigation material is disturbing. It appears that this labor union, the Histadrut, was managed like a private business belonging to an individual. The investigation is very broad, involving dozens of arrests and over 350 people questioned, including high-ranking labor union officials and the chairman of the Workers' Committee and multiple mayors and so on. Bar David initially denied receiving money from a businessman named Galei, but later admitted receiving the cash after being confronted with wiretapped recordings, claiming that it was an unreturned loan. Galei, the insurance agent who gave the funds, contradicted this, calling Bar David a liar. It's worth noting that even more recent, just happened yesterday evening, and we'll talk about it more in the future, the head of the Lahav 433 National Fraud Unit was just brought under investigation by Internal Affairs regarding helping a friend secretly without informing about conflicts of interests. And we have a few more stories that I want to share with you, but there isn't time today. So over the next few weeks, we'll talk about the inquiries into October 7th, the Attorney General and her desire to control the investigation into her friend, the Military Advocate General, the police's take on this investigation, and once again, the new scandal involving the head of the Special Police Unit, as well as regional news. Now, before I finish, I just want to say that yesterday Donald Trump penned a letter to President Herzog telling him that he really must acquit Benjamin Netanyahu and end this farce of the trials against him. Now, I personally believe that Benjamin Netanyahu is completely innocent of the charges and that the charges are ludicrous. We've talked about it in the past, but I, in a sense, do not want him acquitted because for the good of the state of Israel, the corruption and the, I don't even know what to call it, beyond criminal activity of the prosecution and of those that are charging him should be brought to light. And I understand that it's a great sacrifice for him personally and for the state of Israel to have our prime minister occupied by it. But for the sake of bringing to light this corruption, it's worth not having him acquitted. In any case, there's a lot to talk about that as well, but we'll talk about it another time. Please remember Israel in your prayers. Please remember us at Netivyah, and Shalom.